Welcome to 20 Side Adventures. My name's Ryan. Today we're going to be talking about Starfinder's second edition and what that means for your Pathfinder table. So, for me, Pathfinder has always been about the wide variety of character creation options and creating unique and interesting characters. From a mechanical standpoint, you can always create interesting and in-depth characters in any system because you're the author of their backstory and what they're about, their motivations and their drives. But to also find those motivations and drives and inspirations rooted in a system that lets you build a character whose class mirrors what's going on in the mind of your character, I think is one of the strengths of Pathfinder. And now with Starfinder being completely compatible with a few nuances, a little bit of reflavoring, and some tweaking, you have access to that many more class options for your character, as well as ancestries and maybe even backgrounds. This video, though, we're going to be talking primarily about the classes. So if you like this type of content and what I've been doing here on the channel, would really appreciate a like and a subscribe down below. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. I love interacting with the community. And with that, let's get right into it. So if you haven't already, head over to Paizo's website, download the 2E playtest, have a look over. You're going to see a lot of things that are very similar to Pathfinder because, again, they are making Starfinder completely compatible with Pathfinder, and I think that is a great move for them. Again, and for us, too, we get the benefit of the creative energy of both teams can benefit our table, whether we're playing Pathfinder or Starfinder. All of these options are now available to us. So 8 plus con modifier, charisma-based key attribute, like all of these things should sound very familiar. The Envoy is kind of, as it says here, a con artist, diplomat, performer, even a military officer. You might take a role of whatever the situation demands. You're kind of this catch-all, charisma-based, maybe a little bit fighter, maybe a little bit face of the party, just a lot of options. Has some pretty interesting play style. So again, this isn't going to be a class breakdown. This is going to be if you have a player that comes to you and says, hey, I want to play an Envoy at our Pathfinder table. How are we going to make this class make sense in your world, make sense at your table, sync up with the rest of the party, and be functional? So we'll come down here to what the mainstays of what the Envoy seems to do, and then that's what we're going to look at for ideas on how to make this class fit. As you see through here, all of your base stuff, trained in deception, diplomacy, intimidate, trained simple weapons, martial weapons, trained light armor, unarmored defense. There's nothing in here that doesn't just plug right into your Pathfinder table from a rules standpoint. The biggest thing is the Envoy directives. This is what the Envoy is all kind of about. They give an order, and if they follow through with the order, they then buff everyone else up by leading by example. So it kind of has a little bit of the commander idea to it, but rather than spending feats that have your party do things, if your party does the things you suggest, everyone gets benefits and bonuses for doing it. So you're kind of the shot caller in that regard. So when we break this down into the leadership styles from this class, these are kind of the subclasses and the main flavor, I would say, of what the Envoy is all about. So from the front, you're most comfortable leading your allies from the front. You're going to be up in the mix of the fight. You're going to get athletics, trained in medium armor, so all of that makes sense. And then instead of using, so get 'em, this is your directive. If you do this as your first action, you're going to select a creature within 60 feet, and that creature takes a -1 circumstance penalty to AC and reflex saves. So now you've just said, hey, let's get that one. Everyone's a little easier to hit. If you follow through, you gain a circumstance bonus to your damage rolls equals 1 plus your charisma modifier, and your allies gain a +1 circumstance bonus on damage. So you're going to do more damage for hitting the one you've targeted, and then everyone else in the party is going to get some more damage. Now, let's say for whatever reason, you say get them, but you're not able to follow through. So from the front means that if you raise shield or you move closer to that target, it's as if you hit them, so everyone else gets the benefits. So again, from the front, you're a frontline kind of commanding leader. There's no problem with that fitting into a high fantasy setting from sci-fi. From the shadows, you're going to be the more sneaky type, so you're getting stealth. Your leadership perk, assurance of stealth, so nothing unusual there. And then acts of leadership if you hide, sneak, or take cover. All of that fits just fine. Guns blazing. So this one might be a little trickier because obviously in a sci-fi setting, there's a lot more focus on guns versus melee weapons. But let's see, we get acrobats, incredible initiative, nothing weird there. Make a ranged strike against an enemy that has a multiple attack penalty. Perform an area fire or an auto fire. So again, those aren't going to probably, I'm not going to jump into those rules. You can look them up for yourself, but those obviously aren't default to Pathfinder. They're going to be something unique to Starfinder, so those would fall away. And you reload an empty ranged weapon. Nothing there should be a problem outside of those area fire and auto fire. And if you want it at your table, you might even be able to go look at what those rules do, what weapons provide them. Do you have a way to fantasy fitting that in? Maybe like a repeating crossbow has the auto fire. You might be able to reflavor some things that way as well. In the spotlight, so this is going to be the more bard-centric. You want to be talking to people, you want to be out in front, you want to be doing things, so you're going to get performance. You get impressive performance as a leadership perk, and acts of leadership perform or issue another directive. Nothing weird there. Hot shot. So now this is piloting, because again, sci-fi setting, spaceships, flying things around, lots of driving vehicles. This might be harder to fit into your Pathfinder table unless you have a very maybe steampunk themed world, or you have airships, or you just vehicles are a much more important part of your table than they've been at mine. Because this one I would have a little bit harder time, I think, fitting into my world. Infosphere Director. Leadership skill gives you computers, so this is a unique thing to Pathfinder, or to Starfinder, because Pathfinder doesn't have computers. So this one just might be out if it's coming to your table, unless you can think up maybe a lore and some other things to work with that supplement all of the things from Starfinder that involve computers. I would say, though, this probably is going to be a no-go at a Pathfinder table. And then the last one is Through Desperate Times. So this is a more healer focus, so you're going to get medicine. We know what that is. You gain battle medicine as a bonus feat, no problems there. Administer first aid or battle medicine, or use a healing item on an ally. So everything from this leadership skill works, no problem, fits the flavor of Pathfinder and being in a high fantasy setting without issue. So the Envoy is a pretty easy class to move over. As you go through feats, you might have to, just keep an eye on it as the GM. If there's something that's just way outside of your setting, your fantasy, your table's play style, you might have to say, hey man, that feat just isn't going to work for the Envoy. And someone who's, I think, going to be playing a Starfinder class and a Pathfinder table, you're going to have to realize some things maybe just aren't going to work. All right, the Mystic is a casting class. I think it's a lot of fun. It's reminiscent of some of the psionic classes for Pathfinder 1st Edition, which were always a favorite of mine. I've actually modded and converted those over for my Pathfinder table because they were so integral to my world. So this one definitely has a soft spot for me. But wisdom-based, 8 con modifier. Again, as you scroll through here, trained in all the normal things, trained in a skill determined by your connection, simple weapons, unarmed attack, light armor, nothing unusual here. And really we need to get down into their subclasses because I think that's an easy way to get a flavor for how these work. So if you're an Akashic Mystic, you are connecting with the Akashic Record. For me, this would be a very very spiritual thing, connecting with the deity realms that are focused on knowledge and holding history and collecting that information. But spellcasting tradition is occult. Now here's where things will get a little interesting because these come with granted spells that are unique to Starfinder. So you're going to have to look at each of these spells and make sure they don't have anything too wild and crazy for your Pathfinder table. If you're a player wanting to do this, be very understanding with your GM and making sure all of these things aren't going to disrupt the flavor and the vibe of your table and world. So when you look at these, you have like Akashic download. So you're downloading the information, that's just some verbiage change. You're gaining information from the Akashic Record. Instant virus, that one sounds to me probably like a computer virus, so you'd have to go read that one and see what it works. Again, just be very open to playing with what these spells are doing. The rules and the fundamental mechanics are going to function just fine. You just have to find the flavor so that they work with your table and they don't mess up what's going on there. The elemental, so this is primal magic. You're connecting in with an elemental plane. Again, you just have to pay attention to the spells, but I don't find that as a very difficult thing to tie into an elemental plane in your world, that you're a mystic that's communing with this elemental power. So healing, you're probably tying into a deity that has the healing domain. You're tapping into celestial powers that all revolve around healing and magic. This shouldn't be too hard to flavor in. Again, you just have to pay attention to the spells. And then rhythm. This one is focused on melody, the movement of the stars, and the channeling of the cosmic beat and audible rhythm of the universe. This one, primal, very easy again to just tie into the nature and natural movement of your Pathfinder world. These are all pretty simple. Shadow, this one's going to be divine. For my world, this is going to tap into some very dark and evil powers because the Shadow Realm is the source of my big bad evil guy. Other tables, this may not be quite as difficult. Again, all of these, you just have to pay attention to the spells coming from Starfinder and make sure they fit your Pathfinder table. Next up is the Operative, and the Operative to me is like a rogue on steroids. So for me, the biggest thing with the Operative is you're not going to be just that street urchin, thieves guild, doing things with the criminal underworld. An Operative is going to have a backstory where they have been trained and are part or were part of some highly skilled organization that's focus was on espionage. And when we get into this, you can see this from their subclasses again. So operative specialization. So you have the ghost, so you're specially trained for slipping into locations, completing an objective, and extracting yourself without being discovered. Nothing in that says it couldn't be a rogue, but being that focused on it, like you immediately draw up images. I mean, heck, Ghost just straight from StarCraft of what this is going to be portraying. You also get some specific feats for these that are pretty interesting. Infiltrator, so you specialize in bypassing security systems, hazards, and traps. Again, very roguelike, but this is highly specialized where you're going to have some trouble hacking computers, cutting power to a building, right? Some of these examples of what it's giving are very sci-fi, may have some trouble at your Pathfinder table. So keep an eye on the feats and things you're taking and make sure they flavor and work for your Pathfinder world. But again, if you're highly trained at infiltrating the castle, getting past the magical defenses, because in a high fantasy world, there's probably a lot of magical defenses. So you just shift everything over from computing and biometrics to magic. Let's see, the skirmisher, close quarter fighting. This one's not very hard. You were a mugger, bodyguard, or assassin in an urban mercenary. You favor pistols, use them efficiently in tight spaces. So another thing for the operative, they're very gun focused, so you're going to have to keep an eye on that also. You're going to be limited in most of your firearms to what's in the Pathfinder setting, unless you take a look at some of the items on the Starfinder list and you're like, oh, that one, okay, it makes sense. Maybe it's a magical crystal that creates the laser beam, right? There's ways to flavor all of this. The sniper, again, very obviously what that one is. And the striker, this one you're fighting with hand-to-hand weapons. Pretty easy to convert that over. So again, all of this is just flavor and theme. How can I use the developers' creativity and ingenuity in creating new classes? Because they're not just making what we had in Pathfinder and importing it into Starfinder. Like the operative is a unique class from the rogue, even though they do similar things. So now you at the Pathfinder table have an option of being a rogue or an operative. And there's a way to enjoy all of that and give just more choice and breadth at your table. Just be open-minded and work with your GM to make sure you're not bringing in something that's too hard for them to integrate into their world and the story that's being told. The Solarian. So this one's a little trickier, but I still think can fit pretty well. So these are, you become a conduit of stellar forces of the cosmos, a solar knight. So these are almost going to be like paladins or other fighter entities that are devoted to things involving the celestial movements of bodies. So there are domains of star, domains of sun. So these folks, I would tie them into deities that have those domains. And then that just makes bringing in these abilities very, very simple. So while it does pigeonhole them a little bit in what they can do, you also have to understand you're bringing very unique and sci-fi specific things into your high fantasy setting. how are we going to make them work? Next up is the soldier, and frankly, this is the hardest one for me to easily move over because the soldier is so very focused on using heavy weapons that are very sci-fi focused. Missile launchers, Gatling laser guns, plasma cannons, right? Like this class is so set up around bombardment, heavy automatic fire, pinning people down. Um, I didn't have a super good way to convert this one. I would almost say you should probably just be a fighter, but at the same time, if someone really wants to dig into this and just strip away all of the heavy weapons vibes, or if your table can figure out a way to bring some of those Starfinder heavy weapons into their table, then that could be an option. Maybe they can just carry around a siege ballista with them or something. Or they just carry around a small heavy cannon. I just don't know what the reload times on that are going to look like versus what it's supposed to be. So it might be terribly unbalancing. It might be unfair for the reload times. So what seems like the simplest of classes is the most difficult for me to thematically convert over. All right. Last, we have the Witchwarper. This is probably my favorite themed class from Starfinder. This is basically someone that has plucked themselves out of their proper timeline in the multiverse, and they've just been playing with alternate realities and time, and now they're kind of unstuck or able to move between them all. And that's just kind of, I love that sci-fi vibe. Anything that involves alternate timelines, multiverses, how time interacts with people. That's the stuff I just love in sci-fi. So this class really just appeals to me. For me on this one, you would have to be a mage that's dabbling in time magic. It's very easy to make that jump over and just make it all magic instead of science. And it's not that hard. That one's probably one of the easiest for me, at least, to thematically move over. Your subclasses are focused on these paradoxes. So this is just going to tell you the type of magic you were experimenting with to move yourself through time. So the analyst is arcane. You do get the paradox skill computers, so maybe a lore that fits that. And again, you just have to be very careful with the magic. Make sure everything thematically from the Starfinder magic list works in the Pathfinder magic list. The anomaly gives you arcane again. Paradox skill is deception. And then if you go with like the gap influenced or the precog, you're getting occult. So maybe instead of delving into arcane powers, you were working with eldritch entities and beings from alternate timelines that empowered you with these abilities. So this class again is pretty easy to move over. Witchwarper, you're just someone who's dabbling with time magics or beings outside of time. One other thing I wanted to highlight, and I didn't get too much into the ancestries and backgrounds. Again, it just depends on your world on how easy it is to move them over. I personally can explain away most any bizarre ancestry choices with my spirit realm because it's a very haphazard and chaotic place with lots of weird, curious entities, so it probably wouldn't be hard in my table if someone really wanted to grab one of these. But one thing I wanted to highlight that I thought was super interesting and I noticed different from Pathfinder is, where is it? Here we go. All of these species have popular edicts and popular anathemas. So it's giving you a base idea of what these cultures find important. And I don't remember that from Pathfinder. And I think that's a great add for Starfinder. And I'd love to see it for your homebrew worlds or even standard Galarian. What are important to these cultures that are present? All right. Check out the Starfinder playtest. Maybe go run a game and have a little bit of sci-fi at your table. The easiest way for a lot of this stuff to work, I just remembered this one because I was just rewatching some old Star Trek, and you can totally just do the Star Trek trope of you have some sci-fi characters that are integrating into a high fantasy setting, trying to observe the culture. That is also a super easy, like, get out of jail free card for maybe importing some of this. It may not work for your table and game, but it is a tried and true trope to integrate the sci-fi into the fantasy. So again, go check out the playtest rulebook, have a read through it, see what you find, see what you think. Can you use Starfinder 2nd Edition at your Pathfinder table? You absolutely can. If you're interested in doing it at your table, I'd love to hear what classes you're fascinated with, how you think you'd integrate them to your table, and if you've played a Starfinder 2nd Edition character class at a Pathfinder table, I'd love to hear about that also. Wish you guys all the best on your 20-side adventures, and we'll see you next time.